again with you guys. A lot of important things to share. In one of my recent videos, I was talking about how I believe that as the older generation, as a parenting generation, that all over creation, whether you're African, Latino, Indian, Chinese, or whatever, we failed our youth generation. And I think that this is a perpetual disease where every generation fails its upcoming generation. And I just feel that the generation of fatherhood that we're in now, we shouldn't fail or pass up this opportunity to equip the current generation of youth heavily. Okay, I believe that this generation of young people is pivotal. It's the pivot of it's a pivot of creation. That's the right way to say it. I'll say that again. I strongly believe that this present generation of young people, of youth, is the pivot of creation. There's so many things I can tell you. There's a statement that was released by a certain leader. I don't want to get into it right now, who said that black youth are the biggest threat. I'll come back to that video in the future. I'm glad I mentioned it right now. It's going to be on record. I'll look back and I'll have to come and give insight about this very, very important aspect. But today, I just want to come back to this issue of how we've not done a good job in empowering our youth. The problems of youth are different in different continents and different countries. In Africa, the major impact of this youth problem is joblessness or employment. That's where the African youth has been hit the most. Now, before I get to that, because we didn't get to this unemployment problem overnight. It comes back to one of the things I said in one of my earlier videos, I can't remember which one, where I talked about how that if you're going to overturn a problem or solve a problem, you don't arrive at the solution overnight. Because a lot of problems are created by small little details in the building process, which sometimes takes even years. And so it might take equally the same amount of time to go back in time and rewind and be able to pick up those things that happen in the building process to be able to rebuild. And this is what we're doing, especially as we try and solve the youth crisis in Africa, not just in Africa, but like I keep saying, my focus right now is Africa. Okay, so I want to use one key figure as a reference point for the lesson that I want to bring to us today. Now, I've said previously that a lot of the problems that we attribute to the devil is not accurate. A lot of problems are human-made. They are human design. And so we need to understand systems is one of the things that I've said in one of my previous videos. I can't remember which one, but if you keep following what I say, you will know exactly where to find that, perhaps. And I said in one of those videos that until we understand the global systems, we can't really understand the things that are affecting us and bringing the kind of problems that we have. We have to understand the human systems. An important thing also to say in all of this understanding that we're trying to get out here is the fact that life was created with systems in place. Just like our physical bodies were created with systems in place. And when we change those systems, the result is bad. We get terrible outcomes that can even be terminal or lead to death. All right? You can't change the reproductive system. I want to use a key figure who is Dr. Arikana Chihombori, who shares a personal testimony of herself. And it's something that applies also to me. In one of my videos in the past, I've said that I've had so many questions for God. There were questions that to me, it seemed they would never be answered. But even in the silence of my own contemplation, in my own silent review of these issues, where I'd be asking God, why is this like this? Why is it? In fact, let me just confess. One of the questions I used to ask myself very, very often was, why does God love white people more than black people? I used to ask that myself a lot. And it took me time to open up. And very recently, I spoke to one of my brothers, blood brothers. And I asked him to say, have you ever asked yourself this question? He said, yeah, I've just never known who to talk to about it. He says for years he's also been asking himself the same thing. Do you know what that proves? It proves trauma. It proves trauma. Racism and the race theory has affected every human being in ways that they may not be willing or able to confess. Because all of us feel we're supposed to be strong. That's the deception that we fall into. Okay? Now, I don't want to delay the major talking point here, but I found out that the impact of race from generation to generation, because I'm connected to my forefathers who went into slavery and went through colonization, and all of the atrocities that have ever hit Africa, I've been affected by those things. And I didn't know. I was affected by those events that have happened centuries ago in ways that I didn't even know. I was traumatized by slavery, traumatized by colonization in ways I didn't even know. One of those people who confirmed that true, a lot of us are traumatized in ways that we don't even see, is Dr. Arikana Chihombori.
I use the example of religion, and I use an example of myself growing up in Zimbabwe. The British did not come to Zimbabwe until 1896. Prior to their coming, we did not know of white color or black color. We were Africans. We were Africans. But the missionaries came in and they told us about Christianity. They told us about Jesus Christ. They told us about the angels who were white and the devil who was black. Then they turn around and say, the angels are desirable. They do the wonderful things. We must aspire to be like them. And they said, oh, by the way, we may not look like this white sheet of paper. Besides, remember, they introduced the color white and the color black. We didn't have that. So we know how black looks like. We know how white looks like. But they turn around and say, the angels are white and we are white too. Never mind how we look. We may not look like this piece of paper, but believe we are white. And we represent the angel. And you're black. You may not look like this cover of my phone, which is black. But you represent the devil. The devil is black. The devil is evil. We all must run away from the devil. You don't want to represent the devil. Oh, by the way, you may not look like this black piece of paper, but you're black too. Then now let's go to church. And we kneel down in front of the white angels, in front of white Jesus, who we know very well Jesus Christ was not white. Even their own Bible tells us he had crimson skin. We know for a fact that when Mary and Joseph were running away from King Herod, they were told to go to Egypt. Why? Because in Egypt, Jesus Christ would blend with those who looked more like him. If he was white, they would have told them to run to Europe. So we have all these obvious lies that we have been told. So for centuries, we have knelt and worshipped white Jesus and white angels and denied that which they told us represented us.
One of the reasons why I made this presentation is because I came across a video, I think it was on YouTube, by an expert. He's a historian, an expert, I think he's a doctor. And I have to confess I have problems with experts most of the time. But he said that historically, Africans used to call themselves black. And that's not true. First of all, logically speaking, we're not black. You can see I'm wearing a black shirt. Eh? Look how different this is from me. Look, the shirt is black. I'm not black. So, but he maintained that black people historically used to call themselves black. I had a counter argument. I said, you know, for some things you just have to use common sense. And I just used my common sense. I gave him a classic example of where I come from. I come from a country called Zambia, for those of you who don't know. And Zambia is a country of 72 tribes or languages. I've spoken to people from different languages. In fact, even the countries that I've traveled to, Malawi, Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Congo Brazzaville, Congo DRC, Lesotho, Swaziland, a lot of countries, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. I've asked people in Swahili and all these different languages to give me a word for black and white. None of them have a word for black and white. They don't. So it tells you that historically, that's how it has been. So when Dr. Chihombori says that when white people came or Europeans came to Africa, we didn't know black and white, she's absolutely right. Because I don't know if there's any language in Africa that will give you a word for black or white. Africans have always used descriptions to determine color. And that's the language that you find in the Bible. You find people like Job saying, I am dark like coal. They use similes and metaphors. That's African language. Africans have always used shades, in other words. Shades. They'll tell you, like, if your skin burns, for example, they'll tell you your skin has turned like the tongue. See, they use similes and metaphors. And that's the language that you find in the Bible. Again, giving you evidence that the Bible is history of African people. And we're going to get to that. It's going to get really exciting when we get to that part, when we start talking strictly Bible and what that history is, and how you can tell the signs in the Bible itself of who the true children of God are. Because right now there's a big contention in terms of who are the true children of God. We'll get to that at some point. But so I argued with him. I said, no, that's not true. Africans never used to call themselves black. The second reason I gave is scientifically it's been proven to us or given to us, suggested to us that two black people can produce a white person, but two white people can't produce a black person. All right? I don't want to name names that might be offensive, but we've seen very light people come out from two people who are very dark. And there are reasons. The issue of melanin also comes into play. And we don't have time to start breaking down all of those things and bringing in the science and things like that. So if two dark-skinned people are able to produce a very light person, how can the people call themselves black? They cannot. African people have always been referred to as dark-skinned people, not black people. Which is why in our own languages, there are no words for black or white. In my own language, I don't know what the word is for black or light. We use shades. In my mother tongue, same thing, which was different from my father's tribe. Same thing. I don't have time to give you all of those words. And I wish I could I had a very, 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 very rich description from one of my aunties who is from my mother's tribe, which is Tumbuka. She gave some very rich descriptions of color and appearance. And they were not giving names of colors. It was just how appearances are described using shades. Very, very, very rich language and very, very sweet. I wish I could speak like that. You know what I'm saying? So, but I wish I would give you those examples, and maybe in the near future we'll give a little bit more details in terms of what those descriptions are like. But these are the things that we now need to drum into our children. Can you imagine for generations? I grew up believing that angels were white, and it's not biblical. The Bible actually portrays angels as dark-skinned, the way I look, dark-skinned. But Europeans came and believed Africans that the angels were white and demons were black. And which now filters into the subject of what Jesus looked like. And the book of Revelations tells us what Jesus looked like, which is consistent with what angels looked like. When they walked with men like Abraham and Jacob, they looked just like Abraham and Jacob and all these others. They looked just like them. Which is why in books like Ezekiel, you find that descriptions like a man who looked like me, or someone who looked like a man touched me and strengthened me, referring to angels. Angels are described as bronze or brass. That's dark skin. Bronze or brass, that's dark skin. So, a lot of these things now need to be corrected and put in the proper perspective. We have to raise our children correctly, because otherwise the future is bleak. I don't know how else to break this subject to us, but the very fact that our children, especially in the African setting, let me speak for the African setting, at least most of Africa, the Africa that I've been to, I've traveled to about 15 African countries, and the lifestyles are the same, the cultures are the same. This tendency to neglect the teaching of children, which is actually a very, very biblical requirement. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, you shall teach your children when you rise up, when you lay down, when you sit at the table, and when you walk in the street. That's 24 hours, 7 days a week, which many, many parents do not do. And it's because of this trauma, my learning of this trauma, that I've realized how important such commands of teaching children are. Now, for those of you who are parents or are like-minded, that gap when young people are not being told these truths, because many parents are not teachers in the home. They're at the bar drinking their wine or their brandy, and if they're not, they're at work, too busy to do anything else but work. There's this gap between parents and children that is often taken advantage of. On this particular one, I can give you the permission to say the devil. This one, yes, you can claim it's the devil, yes. I'll let you pass with that one. But this time lapse, this gap, is a very dangerous one, because somebody else comes in and fills that gap with something else. It's in this gap where our young people in Africa and in the African American community, our children grow up with a low self-esteem. And they believe things that are thrown at them by any wind of doctrine. Any wind that is blowing by, just throw them these theories about life and they believe anything. And a lot of these theories about life are meant to crush them, crush their spirit. And until we wake up, we start to fill that void. We start doing our job as teachers in the home, as men. We are going to be having serious problems generation after generation. In Africa, people say when there are problems in a country, they say we change the president. The president isn't doing a good job, so you change to bring somebody else. And it's the same cycle of problems. Why? The leaders come from the grassroots. Who teaches the grassroots? The fathers. You and me, who are fathers in the home, we are the ones who teach the grassroots. So the problem is not the presidents. The problem is the grassroots. And who has caused the problem in the grassroots? You, the parents. Because you don't teach anything. Is this making any sense? I don't even want to rush through this lesson, because at the end of the day, I really would like to engage with you and get a confirmation from you. Is this making any sense to you? This is a matter of life and death. It's these little things. You cannot build a big thing if you can't build a small thing. If we can't teach our kids at the grassroots, at the table at which we eat with them, we can't teach them life itself, then there's nothing else we can build. We can't build a nation. The problems of our countries is not the presidents. It's the grassroots. Because those presidents, those governors, those councillors, they come from the grassroots. They come from our houses where we teach them nothing about history. And so I'm pleading with you, become an advocate. That's why I'm literally just campaigning for every one of us to become an activist. Because all of this information that we've never had, a lot of these things I'm sharing with you, no one taught me in school. Went to school for 12 years, sat on a desk, was taught nothing. Was taught Christopher Columbus discovered America. The capital city of Dublin is whatever. Dublin or Ireland, whatever it is. These are the things that we were being taught. You sit 12 years in a classroom, don't learn anything about your life. This is where a lot of our problems are coming from. A lot of us grew up believing demons were black. And so those of us who were black hated ourselves because we saw ourselves as demons. We believed those things. There are a lot of young people who are growing up believing the same thing, because the people who have grown up and should now know the truth are not going back to go and correct the problems at the grassroots. We're still letting the problems recycle through the next generation. And so we talk about generational curses, generational curses. The problem is generational ignorance. That's what it is. Because we keep passing down ignorance. We keep passing down ignorance. It's about time we took stock, took responsibility, and took hold of the narrative of life. We have to start correcting and controlling narratives. The history of Africa has been taught to Africans by other people who've never lived in Africa. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that's the case? So, when you think about the words of Dr. Arikana Chihombori, you think about how African presidents are treated when they go to America or go to England. We've all heard these stories and these reports where African leaders have been put on a bus to be taken to wherever, a hotel or whatever. Something that is never done with European presidents when they come to Africa.
We have made the decision that it is not intelligent for 54 of us to go and sit before one gentleman from another place. And sometimes we are mistreated.
Yeah.
You know, we are loaded into buses like school kids. You know, and it's not.
What do you think causes all those things? All of those things. Trauma is a part of it. Where our leaders literally just feel intimidated. Oh God, I you know what? Let me even just stop there, because the more you start to think about these things, it's heartbreaking. So let me hear your thoughts. Write in, educate me, send me info, and let's talk some more. But I'm very, very concerned that we need to turn around our fortunes. We need to start doing for our children now what our forefathers or our parents didn't do for us. And this is urgent. Like I said, if you forget anything, don't forget this. This current generation of young people, the youth, is the pivot of creation. That turnaround is either going to be worse or it will be good. It will depend on what we do today for our young people. It will depend on what we teach our young people. And it is urgent. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day. God bless you.